Today we're going to talk about owner occupancy and what a motivation letter is. So this is something that actually comes up a lot as an underwriting condition. It's also something that when I'm talking to borrowers, I often will ask about. Now, let me tell you, first of all, one of the biggest sources of fraud is occupancy fraud. It's what all investors are looking for. Whether it's Fannie, Freddie, Ginnie, Jumbo, you name it, they want to make sure that you're actually going to do what you say. So if you say you're going to live in the house, they want to make sure that it's going to make sense that you live in the house. And there's some times where it's a question mark. Now, you may go, well, why would someone lie about if they're going to live there or not? Well, here's why. So if you're buying a house owner occupied, there's lower down payment requirements and the rates are generally lower. If you're buying a second home, the rates are going to be lower than if it's an investment property. You know, they all have different parameters in terms of down payment requirements. They're treated differently, and it's because of risk. An investment home is much riskier to a lender than an owner occupied home, on the basic principle that if stuff goes sideways, the first house you're gonna let go of is the one you don't live in. So the rates are higher to account for that. So when you're being asked for a motivation letter, it means that there's a question mark. The underwriter's wondering, hey, you know, is this potentially a second home or investment? Why do they want to move? And sometimes it's a file filler. Okay? And I wouldn't be offended that you're asked for it. You want to be aware of why we're asking for it and what we're looking for. So let me give you an example. Let's say this is your house and next door is this house. Okay? And you say that you want to buy this house next door and that you're going to be living there. Okay, we would 100% be asking for a motivation letter in this case. The reason is that moving next door generally isn't something someone does unless there's a really good reason. So what would be a good reason? Well, let me reverse these. This is your current house. Your current house is a half-eaten apple. The house next door is totally remodeled. It's the newest, swankiest house in the neighborhood, okay? So if you say, hey, you know, we're gonna be moving next door, we wanna buy this house owner occupied, our house needs a ton of work, we do not want to remodel it, you know, we would rather buy this beautifully new done house, that makes sense. Okay, now if it's reversed, right? If this is your house and you're moving into this, harder sell, right? Why would you leave this beautiful apple for this half-eaten apple, although delicious? You wouldn't. Okay, now another way this comes up is it comes up, you know, if it's the neighborhood next door. Same thing, why are you moving there? Now, reasons that I see people move that make a lot of sense are, okay, let's say your current house is 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom, and the new house is 3 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms. Awesome, more room. Like, who doesn't want an extra bathroom? I want like 5. That makes sense. Or let's say you're moving to a different school district. Great, makes sense. Let's say you're moving to a property, maybe it's smaller than your current house, but it's on an acre and you really want to have chickens or whatever. Makes sense. Okay, now those are the ones when you're buying really close to where you already live and the price point isn't dramatically different. Now, if you live in a $300,000 house and you're buying a $1.2 million house a neighborhood away, they may still ask for a motivation letter, but it's pretty clear why you're moving, right? You're glamorous now. You're living the bling bling life. Okay, congrats. So something like that is more obvious, whereas if you're moving next door or you're moving one neighborhood open and they're not very different in price, we would ask for that letter, okay? A lender can't write that letter for you. We cannot write that letter for you. Please do not ask us to write that letter for you. We cannot do it. And any letter that you send to us, we will submit to our underwriter. We can't delete letters, we can't modify letters, we can't edit letters, we cannot coach you on how to write a letter. So this needs to be authentically, why are you motivated to buy this other house? Okay? Authentically, why? Be honest. And if you're like, oh, well, we're gonna buy this other house and turn it into a rental, well, clearly that's not owner occupied. So be honest. The other reason this can come up would be a distance from your job. So that is something that underwriters look for too, because and we've seen a lot of this during COVID, and it's one of the reasons we were asking for letters from employers that people could work remote. Because I would have someone in California that's like, hey, I want to do owner occupied in Florida. And I'm like, cool, like that's great. Can we get a letter from your employer stating that you can work remote? Okay, if you can get a letter stating that you work remote, great. You know, we'd have the letter from the employer, and then we'd have something from you where you're like, hey, you know, I'd like to move to Florida. It looks nicer. I'm sick of California, whatever. Cool. Okay. Now, if your employer won't give you a letter that works remote, and I've had people say this to me where they're like, let's say you're in California and you want to buy in Washington, and they're like, oh, well, I'm just going to fly back and forth. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. It would work if you're an airline pilot. It doesn't work for anyone else, because an underwriter we're supposed to be able to show a reasonable commute distance, and flying back and forth between your house and work isn't a reasonable commute distance. In terms of driving, you know, it can vary, but usually over 2 hours, it's not looking good. It's not looking good, guys, not looking good. You better have a real compelling motivation letter, okay? And it's something you guys want to be aware of, because I think a lot of times people are like, well, I don't have a loan, or I already paid off a house. Like, I'm saying it's owner occupied. What's your problem? The underwriters have certain things that they have to be able to show to the end investor, which is Fannie, Freddie, Ginnie, or Jumbo, right? They have to be able to show them that the occupancy that you're representing in the file is true and accurate. And if there's any question marks, you can start doing this to people during conversations. They love it. I know. If there's any question marks, they need to have something in the file that substantiates that you don't need to question it. They've already answered it with your intention to occupy that house. So it's important. You know, where I struggle is sometimes we ask for these letters and people just send in stuff where I'm like, what? Like, it makes no sense, but you've sent it to me, so I'm gonna send it to the underwriter. So you guys need to understand that when lenders are asking you this, it's not because we're picking on you, it's not because we're difficult, it's because they're question marks. So we just need a motivation letter. Why are you buying that house? Generally, people have really good reasons, you know? There's always a motivating factor. And if you sit down and you're like, well, I don't know why I'm buying this house. Okay, if you can't figure out why you're buying the house, you shouldn't be buying the house. Like, end and done. So overall, motivation letters for owner-occupied purchases are a very normal thing. Do not be offended. Take time and effort with your letter, and understand the underwriter's trying to make sure you're not buying a second home or an investment home. If you guys have questions or comments, as always, leave them. I am licensed in 46, almost 48 states. I think by the time this airs, it could be 48. I don't know. We'll see. But yes, I'm very excited to help you guys do mortgages clearly. Thanks for watching.